thought I was on here. Whoops.
I may have been wrong about Renopila not having a practical use. Earlier today, my furry new companion started bouncing around so excitedly that I couldn't calm her down. And then soon enough, it started raining. I brushed that off as a coincidence, but soon after filling my water skins and setting off once more, she started acting skittish. I decided to find shelter just in case, and within minutes, light rainfall had turned into an electrical storm. I'll need to find more evidence to draw any firm conclusions, of course, but I wouldn't mind having a fuzzy little weather radar with me. You know, it's a little on the nose, but radar's not a bad name. Thank goodness I decided to find some high ground 2 days ago, or I'd never have spotted this settlement. That's twice now that I've stumbled into my own salvation. I can't count on that happening again. I'll need to stay here for a while and prepare before setting out once more. Fortunately, the villagers are willing to let me trade work for supplies and shelter. Another stroke of luck, and another factor I can't rely on. On the island, Rockwell's name got me far, but here, I'm just another stranger. Not everyone. In some ways, surviving on my own was less work. At least then, I wasn't conscripted into manual labor. Ugh. My whole body feels sore. I bet I wouldn't have to work if I were as adorable as Radar. The whole village is in love with her. I swear they spoil her like a furry little princess. Rockwell would be livid about this arrangement. I can just hear him ranting about treating scholars with propriety. I hope the old Brit is doing well. Maybe when I've broken this mystery wide open, I'll figure out a way to get him off the island, and we can discuss it all over tea like old times. While my mind still can't recall the last time I fired a gun, my muscle memory is much better. According to my would-be instructor, I wasn't a complete disaster on the firing range. I'm no pacifist. Death and violence are a part of life, that's just nature. Yet a gun still makes me a little uncomfortable. The idea of shooting at another human just seems instinctively wrong to me. I couldn't even fire at the new Legion back on the island. But I need to pull my weight. The villagers have been welcoming and patient with me. For their sakes, I need to practice. I may have to put my freshly polished marksmanship skills to the test sooner than I thought. A hunting party spotted a swarm of giant mantises heading in our direction. Yes, giant mantises. I haven't spotted them with my own eyes, but the villagers have spoken of them every now and again. They say the insects have these little hands that can actually grip and wield weapons or tools. Sounds absolutely loony. But so is the idea of a mantis swarm at all. They must share ghost mantises' distaste for cannibalism. No one seems keen on fighting them, but they're too close to outrun. My hopes that the mantises would ignore the village were unfounded, and I think we were all wondering if this morning's sunrise would be our last. Despite all my practice, my rifle felt heavy and foreign in my shaking hands as the swarm advanced. Fortunately, they weren't our only visitors. The villagers erupted in cheers as lightning and fire tore through the advancing insects from above. Some chanted a name, Wali al-Aswad. The rider, still hidden behind black robes, didn't acknowledge the ovation. With swift just who or what Wali al-Aswad is depends on who you ask. Some of the villagers have attached a religious connotation to the figure, believing it to be some sort of heavenly guardian who appears to the worthy in their time of need. One villager is even convinced Wali is an extraterrestrial. I don't deal in beliefs. I deal in empirical evidence. And that means nothing about Wali is certain until I can meet them. I won't forget this villager's kindness. Especially after I'm definitely more prepared for this desert than before, and better equipped. With my Morellatops offering a large, mobile supply of water, and radar looking out for the weather, the only threat I really have to worry about is major predators. Also, giant golems. I'm actually impressed with the shape I'm in, if I do say so myself. I think I even saw some app definition the other day. Took me long enough. I've been living without sweets for ages after all. You'd think I'd get fit much quicker. Ah, great. Now I miss sweets. Ah, the things I'd do to taste chocolate again.
It has been several days since I left Prophet's Rest, and I have seen no sign of pursuit. I am unsurprised. They probably assumed that I would make for the blue obelisk as it was nearest. By setting out for the green obelisk instead, I already outwitted those simple-minded zealots. As I said, miles ahead. Miles. With those fools out of the way, I can slow my pace and take some time to properly study these so-called sacred relics of theirs. I am curious to see if the materials they are made of bear any similarity to the metal in the Starlit Sanctuary. The obelisk is reacting to the presence of the artifacts with even more intensity than I expected. Each obelisk on the island required 8 artifacts to generate that sort of response, not 3. In other words, I may not need to do any spelunking before summoning whatever terrifying beast this Ark has in store for me. Ah, the beast. Now that poses an entirely different conundrum. Even with my youth and my favorite pipe, I doubt that I could slay a monster such as that dragon Mr. Nerva fought. Not alone, anyway. I shall need to find a partner for this venture. But who? I have turned back north in the hope of making contact with some of the natives. It is a risk, as I cannot be sure how many bumbling savages are under the sway of that ludicrous obelisk-worshipping cult, but it is also the only region that I definitively know is occupied. I do not have much to offer in exchange for their aid, but I'm sure that what terrible misfortune! My keen sense of direction finally led me to a local settlement, but as it happened, I was not the first party to visit it that day. That honor belonged to the Burning Phoenix clan, a band of raiders that were plundering its storehouses and enslaving its surviving residents as I arrived. Naturally, the hoodlums fell upon me and stripped me of my valuables within minutes of my arrival. Ruffians! I managed to keep hold of my journal, but little else. This won't do, not at all. Then again, I was seeking out a tribe skilled and curse these stubborn brutes. Despite a litany of polite, gentlemanly requests, they refuse to allow me to parley with their leader. Surely any leader of men is not half the imbecile that these barbarians are. I am positive that we could come to some sort of... Oh, damn this noise! It is impossible to concentrate with all this insufferable whinging. Half of these prisoners won't stop moaning about one injury or another, and the other half are in constant hysterics. Very well. Perhaps if I tend to some of the wounded, it will dim this distracting cacophony. At last, I can hear myself think. The guards have moved me to a private cell, and while they have not divulged the reason for my transfer, I suspect that they took notice of my medical expertise. I caught them staring in my direction on several occasions as I worked. It seems the doctors are in high demand in these lands. I suppose that's no great surprise. The island was no different. No matter. After days of travel, we finally arrived at the Burning Phoenix clan's compound. And while my former peers were shuffled to the slave pens, I stood before the clan's leader. I'd heard tales of the once great Tatar empires, though I had never traveled to their lands. By all appearances, Timur is cut from the same cloth as their fabled Khans. He was at once imperious and casual, questioning me with impatience from a throne of hide and bone. Naturally, he was impressed by my intellect and gentlemanly demeanor. Granted, he did not say so aloud, but I was escorted to a small private chamber instead of a cell. Surely, that says as much. I had been pondering why Timur required the services of a doctor. He seemed to be in excellent health, and I had seen no patients since I arrived. Well, now I shall ponder no longer. Timur has a wife, and she's with child. I suppose that even bloodthirsty raiders can fall in love, or at the very least, desire a family. The whole affair would be rather quaint were I not expected to care for the woman and deliver the child. Should either the child or the woman die during the birth, I fear that I will follow them in short order.
Usually found in the deepest parts of the water around the island, Ammonitena multiamicus has a strange relationship with the other creatures of the deep. It must do something beneficial for them, since every nearby sea creature defends Ammonitena when it is attacked. What this distinct symbiosis is based on, alas, I have not yet discovered. Ammonitena has also made its way into the deeper parts of many underwater caves. Even within these caves, the creature will draw attention if assaulted, making harvesting its resource-rich shell a tricky proposition, depending on what other dangers may be lurking nearby. Like many of the untamable ocean dwellers, Ammonitena still has enough utility to be a valuable hunting target. If a tribe is willing to risk the wrath of nearby would-be protectors, Ammonitena bile can be harvested from the innards of its corpse. This bile can then be worked over with other chemicals to produce powerful concoctions, the most notable being a mixture that causes creatures to become enraged and attack the source of the scent. Occupying a space in the low to middle end of the food chain, Electrophorus beluardomito is a carnivorous swimmer that feeds mostly off of shellfish and small fish. Despite its common name, it is actually a very long knife fish, and not an eel. It does not provide much meat, so many predators simply leave it be. Unlike most predators, it does not use brute strength to bring down its prey, but instead releases an electrical charge around itself to knock its prey unconscious. Alone, this can take out a small creature. When attacking together, Electrophorus can even bring down the larger ocean life forms, and then feed as a group. By far the most common use of Electrophorus is to subdue large ocean creatures. Knocking out Microraptor narrolongus is one of the smallest non-avian dinosaurs on the island. Incredibly fast for its size, Microraptor is a voracious carnivore. Aggressive towards anything regardless of size, Microraptor fancies itself an apex predator. It will attack humans. Thylacoleo fertimorsus is a large, powerful marsupial that can often be found hunting around the trees among the island's redwoods. Its long claws and opposable Equus magnus appears to be an ancestor of the modern horse. Based on its Leadsichthys conviviumbrosia is probably the largest fish in the waters around the island. Its meat is also extremely succulent, a surprise given its size. It is often traded with the same value as prime meat, and colloquially called prime fish. Of course, Not all Leedsichthys meat is this high quality, but most of it is. While the demand for Leedsichthys meat is high, the fish is notoriously difficult to track and hunt. Between its large size, powerful attacks, incredible speed when it turns to flee, and humankind's general ineptitude on open water, actually killing a Leedsichthys is one of the island's more difficult tasks. The hunt for an extremely elusive breed of the fish, the fabled great albino Leedsichthys, has been known to drive otherwise sensible men and women mad with obsession, as if all evil were visibly personified and made practically assailable in this one creature. Despite its large size and the fact that it may well be strong enough to carry heavy loads, Leedsichthys does not appear to be intelligent enough to tame. Nevertheless, some large tribes keep an enormous pen with a few Leedsichthys trapped inside for cultivating purposes, as bits of prime fish can be repeatedly scraped off the gargantuan beast without killing it. Among the most vocal creatures on the island, Ichthyornis piscoquis actually appears to be a relatively normal seagull. It primarily eats fish, and its distinctive cries can be heard echoing over across the island's many beaches. As you might expect from a seagull, Ichthyornis will flee at the slightest provocation. Ichthyornis is a versatile and of the many creatures I've yet encountered on the island, the Iguanodon vicissitudinus has the distinctly versatile capability of switching its primary method of locomotion according to its momentary needs. Primarily a rather lethargic bipedal herbivore native to the island's many grasslands and forests.
I was ever so glad to see Miss Walker again. My assistants are clever in their own right, but dear Helena is still the only person that I feel comfortable diving into my deeper theories with. I fear that I may have kept her from getting a word in edgewise, though. Once I got going on the obelisks, why, I just couldn't contain my enthusiasm. My word, I really have become quite enamored with the subject, haven't I? Well, that settles it. After this next set of trials, I shall go check on the Iron Brotherhood's progress. Perhaps I can convince Miss... The latest Broth of Enlightenment trials have concluded, and as expected, I am disappointed in the results. Though the primates I tested it on showed increased aptitude for learning, I do not believe any of them have truly ascended to a higher level of intelligence. Well, bugger the little blighters, I say. My assistants have almost finished preparing my supplies for my next expedition, and I have drafted a letter to send to the Iron Brotherhood ahead of my departure. Soon enough, I'll have forgotten all about them. Pardon the interruption, it seems that I have a guest. Now, just what is Mr. Nerva doing here? I suppose I'll find out. I have always tried to maintain a strict neutrality when it comes to tribal matters, but then again, I have never had an offer this tempting from someone as respectable as Mr. Nerva. Not only has he offered to provide me with test subjects, but he has also expressed a mutual interest in investigating the obelisks. All he asks from me is that I provide him with reliable counsel. I would trust few tribes to be able to make good on such promises, but Mr. Nerva's new legion is perhaps the most powerful tribe on the island. Indeed. If they maintain their current trajectory, they may be the only powerful tribe on the island. His offer is worth considering, at the very least. After much deliberation, I have decided to accept Mr. Nerva's offer. True, the new legion is not beloved by many other tribes, but was Charlemagne beloved by his enemies? If my studies are to continue, I must be on the right side of history. As part of our agreement, I will need to try. I admit I have been rather coy with Mr. Nerva when it comes to the true nature of the obelisks. As a military man, the obelisks would naturally be more useful to him if they were some sort of weapon, and I have made sure to allude to that possibility from time to time. It is not as though I am selling my gracious host a falsehood. After all, I have neither any proof that the obelisks could be weaponized nor any evidence to the contrary. Their purpose is entirely theoretical at this stage, and if twisting those theories will... The new legion is finally on the march, and not a moment too soon. Mr. Nerva runs his tribe exceptionally well, but their compound is positively Spartan. I don't think I saw a single piece of decor anywhere. It certainly made me miss the comforts of Rockwell Manor, I'll say that. At any rate, we are apparently in pursuit of a barbaric beast queen. According to the men, she feasts on the flesh of her enemies alongside her army of monsters. Dreadful. I am absolutely astonished, shocked, flabbergasted. Why in the world was Miss Walker investigating the obelisks at the side of such a savage woman and without notifying me first? Was she intending to discover their secrets behind my back and keep them all to herself? The nerve! The audacity! And after I treated her with such respect and civility... Well, unfortunately for her, Sir Edmund Rockwell is always one step ahead of his rivals. Thanks to my partnership with Mr. Nerva, I can combine what scraps of knowledge she has on the obelisks with my own findings, and she'll be none the wiser. Why? Since she is confined to it.
After going over my notes from Mei Yin's camp, I've concluded that the animals on this island are not only used to humans, but used to captivity. Even with their accelerated growth rates, their behavior indicates that they have been regularly domesticated, for decades at least. Otherwise, they'd never obey the whims of mankind so easily. With that in mind, I believe that my theory about this island being curated is back in play. In fact, it's possible that not only are animal populations being controlled. This is the smoking gun. It has to be. I simply can't be convinced that this place is natural, after finding an island populated entirely by carnivores. Even if they fed off each other, which is awfully dubious given that carnivore meat is much more likely to carry harmful parasites than herbivore meat. The landmass is so small and their population is so dense that they could never maintain it. Yet there it is. Hidden away off the northeast coast of the island. Someone would have to put them there on purpose. As I expected, Rockwell couldn't deny my theory. But I can't say that I have his endorsement either. He didn't seem terribly engrossed in the subject, frankly. Something else seems to have captured his attention as of late. The island's obelisks. Apparently, Rockwell stumbled upon a way to interact with the towering monuments while spelunking. of all things. I guess he felt the need to scratch that old intrepid explorer itch of his. It's pretty impressive considering his age. Now that I think about it, the obelisk could be linked to my own findings. Their nature has always been a mystery, and Rockwell made some intriguing observations. I should follow up. Though I've been received by the Iron Brotherhood, they didn't seem very pleased to see me, especially when I mentioned Rockwell. That's a first. Add to that the rather deserted, gloomy state of their compound, and I'm starting to feel a bit apprehensive. Their leader can't return from his hunting expedition soon enough. All I've confirmed so far is that, yes, they gathered all of the artifacts Rockwell sought, and yes, the artifacts were able to activate one of the obelisks. You'd think they'd be celebrating such a monumental discovery, but it's just killjoys as far as the eye can see. Go figure. I keep glancing at the artifact. I understand why the Iron Brotherhood's leader didn't want it. Since it has no apparent use, all it does is remind him of the tribesmen who died seizing it from that giant spider. Can it really be useless, though? They described the artifacts that activated the obelisks as looking similar to it, so I headed to the nearest obelisk to see if I could get a response. No luck. Maybe it activates something else. Of course. Unbelievable. The artifact perfectly fits one of the slots in the platform's pedestal. How did I not notice that right away? I really am a dipstick. So if this key, such as it is, was acquired by activating one of the obelisks, then it follows that the other two keys can be obtained by activating the other two obelisks. Then, with all three keys, maybe this platform will lead to whatever is controlling the island's ecosystem. If the other obelisks work the way that the first one did, that means I have to find a whole mess of artifacts first. And I don't think I can do that alone. Well, the Howling Wolves are quickly tracking down the artifacts. But after hearing about what happened to the Iron Brotherhood, that's as far as they'll go. It's understandable, but it leaves me in a tight spot. If a giant spider and I get in a scrap, the spider's winning for sure. Even with Athena on my side, I prefer to avoid danger, not confront it. My aim's piss poor, and I've got fists like marshmallows. If I want a fair go at actually surviving whatever happens when the obelisk activates, I'll need backup. Negotiation notes. Don't mention feces. Don't look directly at the glare. Bring chili. Unburned. Now, I know you don't get a nickname like Beast Queen without being one tough lady. But when I saw that giant ape, I still thought we were buggered. Fortunately, Mei Yin's got more intestinal fortitude than yours truly. And somehow, some way, she was able to pull out a win. Glad I'm on her good side. I already found the second key, but I want to take a look around here before we head back through the portal. This ape either lived here, or was released when we activated the obelisk. Finding out how it survived in this isolated environment, or how it got here, could prove useful. In the wild, Apis lithohermiodrones never stray far from their nests, which they build high in the island's redwood trees or on rocky cliffsides. Apis drones can be seen swarming around the nest in groups, but to get a look at the queen apis, one would need to crack open the... Daeodon comidentis is the largest known species of Entelodon, an omnivorous family of ancient mammals that are sometimes referred to as hell pigs. Even though Daeodon has as many similarities to modern hippopotamidae as it does to swiner, I found that to be a suitable nickname. Daeodon is as mean as it looks, and any survivor who wanders too close will find that out the hard way. As an omnivore with a voracious appetite, Daeodon scavenges, forages, and hunts to... While Kentrosaurus ethiopicus is considerably smaller than its close relative, Stegosaurus regium, it is much more formidable in matters of self-defense. In fact, Leopleurodon magicus is a mid-sized ocean creature, typically between 20 and 25 feet long. I've yet to directly encounter one myself, but from the tales other tribes have shared, it compares to no other on the island. The rumors indicate that this beautiful creature has magical properties. However, the sightings are so rare, it's hard to decipher old tribes' tales from the underlying truth. They say that Leopleurodon is an elusive creature that can harness its magical powers to retreat from predators or aggressors of any kind. The beekeeping... So these are the conquerors that I heard about way back when. Not a great first impression. Mei Yin and I weren't quite mates. But watching her creatures get slaughtered like that certainly wasn't pleasant. I'm not a fan of the prisoner lifestyle either. The leader introduced himself as Gaius Marcellus Nerva, and he's not a complete buffet, I'll give him that. He let me keep my personal effects, and our conversations have been civil so far. I get the feeling that'll change if I don't cooperate, though. Not that I have much choice. They already took the keys. The only way I'm seeing this through is as a guest of the new Legion. This Nerva bloke's fig jam incarnate. He seems to think he's Jupiter's gift to the island or some rubbish like that. I think his ego was actually tangible when the Legion returned from the obelisk with the third key and the head of a dragon in tow. Sadly, as much as I would enjoy seeing him fall flat on his face, I need him, and I need the new Legion. So when he asked me to guide his forces to the hidden cave, I obliged without protest. What he'll do with me afterwards? I don't know. When Nerva and his band return from the cave, they'll decide my fate. So this may be my final chance to reflect. I may as well take advantage of it. I realize that had I just ignored the signs and accepted this paradise at face value, I'd still be happy and free. Would that have been better? I don't think so. After a lot of thought, I've decided that I'd rather die seeking the truth than living in an illusion. That, as Rockwell would say, is the path of a true scientist. Not that I'm Galileo battling the church or anything, but hey, it's something to hold on to.
Before arriving on this island, I would have dismissed the idea of a device instantly transporting a person from one location to another as complete and utter poppycock. Yet, that appears exactly what the strange platforms beneath the obelisks are capable of doing. Astounding. Yes, there was a dragon on the other side. I'm sure Mr. Nerva and his men fought quite the heroic battle, but discovering another slobbering beast is trivial in comparison. Imagine, one could go from one side of the globe to the other in the blink of an eye, and I'll wager that is just the start of the obelisk's capabilities. I must learn more. I must. I am starting to become quite cross with Mr. Nerva's impatience. I had barely any time at all to study the obelisk before we set out again, this time to that cave Miss Walker mentioned. I wonder, does he believe that she knows more about the obelisks than I do? Nonsense! Any fool could see that I am the superior scientist. Besides, I am his official advisor while she is his prisoner. She isn't even privy to my presence. Nonetheless, I feel compelled to prove my scientific mettle. Whatever is in that cave, I shall be the one to discover its purpose. The mysteries of the obelisks are mine to uncover, not Miss Walker's or even Mr. Nerva's. Mine.
Among the island's most tenacious pack is Hyenodon dirus, a carnivore most often found across the mountains and tundras in packs of 3 to 6. Hyenodon is a very intelligent predator. Megalania murispide is among the largest creatures found throughout the island's The Eutyrannus sievus is believed to be related to the Tyrannosaurus rex, but it is noticeably different upon first glance. Feathered creatures are not necessarily viewed as dangerous predators in the same light as other theropods. However, the Eutyrannus strikes fear into even the island's most skilled hunters. There are few wild predators that are able to pack hunt alongside the generally hostile Carnotaurus, like the Eutyrannus does, with such ease. It is also the only creature I've seen to consistently induce a state of panic in opponents with its roar. Upon hearing it, most creatures in the area will flee for safety. A domesticated Eutyrannus can be a powerful offensive or defensive addition to war parties. With its mighty roar, it can induce fear in opposing creatures. Meanwhile, Eutyrannus can be trained to develop a confidence-boosting battle cry, which counteracts enemy attempts to induce fear, while also bolstering the resolve of allies, and may even draw wild Carnotaurus to its aid. These unique leadership qualities make the Eutyrannus. Megatherium formipava is one of the larger mammals on the island. This is most shocking because it is essentially a giant sloth. If you cross, possessing the appearance of a half-duck, half-dinosaur, Hesperornis is a medium-sized fish-eating bird, common in the rivers and lakes of the island. It would be about 2/3 the height of a human if it stood tall. But it rarely does. Hesperornis spends most of its time gliding along the surface of the water, where it is much more maneuverable. Hesperornis is barely a threat to any land-dwelling creature, as its legs are too short for it to move around effectively. But it is surprisingly fast in the water. It can easily hunt down fish and other small water-dwelling creatures. not particularly useful for hunting, and not being affectionate. Hesperornis is primarily kept for the eggs it produces after consuming much fish. When rendered correctly, the eggs separate into two useful substances. One is a protein substance that is high in calories, and the other is an oily liquid that is effectively the same as the oil found in the ocean. It took weeks of searching, but I finally caught a glimpse of Wali al-Aswad. I knew I was getting close when I found a series of fulgurite formations this morning. And sure enough, I spotted several wyverns later in the afternoon with a lone rider among them. The rider clearly saw me too, because soon enough the wyverns were circling overhead. I waved and yelled in greeting, even called out Mei Yin's name just in case. Yet with so much as a nod, the wyverns regrouped and flew off. Waleed's not a social butterfly. Of course Wali lives on a bloody mountain. Of course they do. I saw their wyverns land at the summit yesterday, and they haven't left. This has to be their home. Unfortunately. The paths were too narrow for my Morellatops, so I had to leave it behind. It should know to wander off if I don't return for it. Not that I can really afford to worry about it. The climb's doing a fine job of kicking my ass even without distractions. I swear, if I don't have a six-pack after climbing a mountain in the bloody desert, I'm gonna be awfully cross. I don't know what kind of reception I expected when I reached the summit, but laughter wasn't one of them. Yet that was exactly what I heard when I finally let myself collapse and started flinging every obscenity I could think of at this damned mountain. The bemused laughter of an old woman. Wali al-Aswad is definitely no guardian angel. She was quick to dismiss those particular rumors with remarks about how the gods have abandoned this wretched place. As long as I avoided that subject, though, she's welcomed my questions with surprising warmth, though often enigmatically. I have a feeling that It turns out that I didn't find Wali al-Aswad. She found me. While the portal I used to get here opened with little fanfare on my end, apparently the other side created quite the spectacle. According to Wali, it was easy for her to spot from atop her wyvern, and she started tailing me soon afterwards. I guess her timely interventions were no coincidence. She didn't seem very surprised when I told her about the obelisks, their guardians, or even that this desert is actually a space station. Either she knows more than she's saying, or experience has grinded the surprise right out of her. I really missed flying. There's no replicating the feeling, and no replacement for seeing a sunrise amongst the clouds. Wali probably started these wyvern riding sessions just to give herself an escape hatch when our conversations get too personal. But I can't say I mind. Despite their appearance, riding a wyvern is just as pleasant as riding an Argentavis, even without a saddle. By design, perhaps. No matter. Genetically engineered or not, they are magnificent creatures. It's a risky proposition, but I absolutely must observe them in the wild sometime. I can't pass up an opportunity like that. Now that Wali has deemed my wyvern riding skills acceptable, she's finally agreed to show me around the region. From what I can gather, Wali has been here for a very long time, maybe longer than Rockwell was on the island. She knows the history of every village and ruin. Apparently there was once a great city to the southeast, but it was wiped out at some point. She's still coy on a lot of the details, but I'll just have to keep prying. Radar's been helpful in that regard. Wali definitely see. I'm grateful that Wali allows me time to study the local wildlife, but I suspect she only does so out of amusement. She always says something like, "Why do you spend so much time on these scribbles that no one will read?" I never have a good retort. It's true, no one may ever read my dossiers. as I have no way to reproduce or distribute them as long as I'm trapped on one of these space stations. When I started them, they were a passion project, created out of my love for nature and its creatures. I can't believe it. Wally spotted someone wandering in the desert the other day, and it turned out to be none other than Edmund Rockwell. I just about burst into tears when I recognized him. Apparently, he heard that Nerva was holding me captive and sought to negotiate my release. That led him to the cave, and eventually he wound up here. Awfully sweet of him to go through all that trouble for my sake. Strangely, Wally claims that she saw a portal open up far away from her territory shortly before mine did. I guess that was Rockwell's, though Wally arrived at the scene too late to track him. Rockwell theorized that the portals may have taken us through time as well as space. Considering my present company, I'm inclined to agree with him. Wally has been much quieter since we found Rockwell. I guess she's just letting us catch up. However, she did say something interesting when we were recounting Nerva's ambitions for the island. This place would never allow anyone to master it, she said. And when I asked her to explain it, she told me that the great city to the southeast was destroyed by the obelisk itself. Now, it's just conjecture, but it's interesting to think about. Could the curators of these stations be monitoring human behavior and clipping its wings should the survivors ever band together and fly too close to the sun? If each station represents a different group in a larger experiment, resetting human progress would make a lot of sense. It's a bit grim though, isn't it? Yikes. I don't think Rockwell's been sleeping much. I awoke last night to find him studying a strange piece of metal by firelight. I guess some tribe gave it to him as a gift, along with a very familiar-looking artifact. I insisted that we show those items to Wally, and she recognized them as the property of this station's lone guardian. With all that she knows, I'm not surprised that she's activated the obelisk before. Hell, it sounds like the old battle axe has even slain the beast herself. Since we have said Guardian's artifact, Wally says that we can leave the station at any time. I suppose we may as well. Rockwell's eager to depart, and as much as I like Wally, I've had my fill of sand. The transporter that can take us back to the Control Center station is in the ruins of another city, south of the mountains. Wally believes that it was destroyed by the obelisks, just like the city in the southeast. I didn't press her for details. Not that I'd have gotten any. Wally's more tight-lipped about those ruins than anything. I had to practically beg her to take me to the southeastern city, and while we were there, she spent most of her time just gazing out into the distance. No sense in bringing her mood down with that rubbish now. After all that she's done for me, I'd like to give her a nice, proper farewell. Having seen us through the ruins and safely to the platform, Wally has taken her leave. After doing so much for me, I was sad to see her go. But at least I got to see her smile before she left. Well, me and Radar. I can't very well take the little critter with me, so I officially gave Wally ownership of her. They'll be good for each other, I think. I wrote Wally up there, twice. I suppose old habits die hard, but it's not really her name, is it? I always knew that was the case, but she'd never told me to call her anything else. At least not until now. Well, at any rate, cheers, Raya. It was a pleasure to have known you.
Nazreen is quite different from her husband. She's a timid little flower of a woman, or rather, she would be if she were not many months pregnant. I'm still undecided as to whether my timing is impeccable or unfortunate. A few weeks from now, Timur may have had no need of a doctor, but as it stands, I have been thrust into an unfamiliar scenario with scant time to prepare. Despite my unpleasant circumstances, this whole affair is rather intriguing. I never considered the possibility of new generations being born on the Ark. Yet clearly it was inevitable. Like any common animal, humans have the urge to procreate. How else could the species endure? Rockwell, old bean, you've done it again. Both mother and child made it through. Timur is a proud father, and your head is still attached to its shoulders. Why, I was even a guest of honor at Timur's celebratory feast. I cannot say I enjoyed the blood sport that serves as the Burning Phoenix's entertainment, but the food was delectable. I was also sure to seize upon Timur's momentary goodwill by filling his ears with whispers of obelisks, artifacts, and the untold power they grant to mortal men. It may take time for those thoughts to turn to action, but with constant care, I may yet turn him into my unwitting general. The silver tongue of Sir Edmund Rockwell has prevailed once again. After spending far too long watching the Burning Phoenix enslave and decimate hapless caravans and villages, I have convinced Timur to test his might against the Guardian of the Obelisk. I admit, I am somewhat anxious. Timur is not the commander that Mr. Nerva was, and should he fall, I shall fall with him. Yet I have little choice, and the rewards of success are worth the risk. I found it. I really found it. Raw, untainted samples of that same mysterious ore from the sanctuary. That fearsome beast must have been guarding it. Thank the heavens for Timur and his berserk savagery. When he leapt from the back of his wyvern, I thought he was surely doomed. But the madman actually managed to grab hold of that monster's horns and turn its eyes into a bloody mess. I have never seen such brutally effective barbarism. Many of his band did not survive the encounter, of course, but that was to be expected. Progress requires. This ore is simply extraordinary. It is warm to the touch, even during these cold desert nights, and it pulses as though it has its own heartbeat. It is at once light and more sturdy than any natural material I have encountered. The uses one could find for such a substance. I shall have to name it at some point. What would do? Rockwellium? Edmundium? A dilemma for another time. For now, I have more pressing matters. Timur and his Burning Phoenix savages have played their part, and I cannot remain in their custody. It is time for the great warrior chief to receive his just reward. Alas, poor Timur. He was so focused on celebrating his victory over one foe that he never saw his greatest threat. Now he lies beneath the severed head of the beast he vanquished, eyes bulging and blood seeping from his open mouth. At least, that is how I imagine him. I did not stay to admire my handiwork. As soon as the first group of Burning Phoenix warriors succumbed to their poisoned feast, I stole away into the night, Edmundium and artifact in tow. Serves those ruffians right, I say. They never did treat me with the propriety that a gentleman and scholar of my caliber deserves. As my withdrawal from the Burning Phoenix's camp demanded haste, I did not have the time to double-check my supplies. It appears that I shall have to do some hunting. No matter. I may not be as spry as I was when I felled the charging rhino on the plains of the Serengeti, but with the small armory I managed to abscond with, I can surely manage. I had planned on... Despite my limited equipment, I have managed to run some initial tests on the Edmundium. Based on my observations, a typical forge may not be enough to smelt a sample of Edmundium ore into any sort of usable ingot. I suspect that it has extremely strong metallic bonds, and therefore a much higher melting point than any conventional metallic element. I must find a proper base of operations where I can run more extensive experiments. I mustn't be overeager, however. I have limited samples and... Drat, I shall have to ruminate on this later. A sandstorm may be brewing, and I have no desire to be caught in it. Confounded weather. Not only did that sandstorm separate me from my steed, but when it cleared, I was beset upon by none other than the traitorous Miss Walker herself. Oh, she put on quite the act, spouting all sorts of nonsense about how good it was to see me. Rubbish. I see right through her ruse. I am certain that she is after my Edmundium. The only reason she has not simply looted it from my corpse is that she requires my superior intellect to understand it. Well, two can play this game, Miss Walker. I can fill the role of the benign old scientist for a time, but I shall not be betrayed again. I am glad that I possessed the foresight to hide my presence from Miss Walker after her capture on the island. She clearly believes that I never learned of her betrayal. By cunningly taking advantage of this fact, I have managed to completely deceive the deceiver. The grim old bat she travels with is another matter. I often catch her glaring in my direction, her eyes sharp and mistrusting. If I could, I would deal with her as I dealt with Timur. But I fear she is far too observant. For now, I must maintain my deception as best I can. I may have given Miss Walker too much credit. Although I carelessly allowed her to catch sight of my Edmundium ore samples, she was more interested in the artifact I possess. I should have realized this sooner. Miss Walker's specialty is biology. She would not recognize the unique properties of Edmundium if they hit her square in the forehead. That fact has eased some of my tension. Even if Miss Walker seeks to take advantage of my genius, she is focusing on the wrong discoveries. So long as I am careful in my studies of Edmundium, I cannot wait to be rid of that glowering menace of a woman, this so-called Wali al-Aswad. I suspect the feeling is mutual. She has offered little in the way of farewells, while seeing us to this ark's entrance to the starlit sanctuary. Things will be much easier once Miss Walker and I have parted ways with the Desert Witch, I suspect. Miss Walker is thoroughly oblivious to both the wonders of Edmundium and my knowledge of her underhanded scheming back on the island. She can continue to fiddle with trinkets and relics. I may even assist her if it suits me. Meanwhile, I shall unlock the secrets of the most extraordinary element in the universe, right under her nose. In all my life, I have never seen so magnificent a sight. Mr. Nerva may be bemoaning the loss of...
Well, I'm not dead. And as it turns out, neither was Mei Yin. In fact, it was her who freed me, and insisted we follow Nerva through the portal in the cave. A horrifying scene awaited us. All of Nerva's men lay dead amongst the shards of a mysterious metal, but Nerva's body was missing. Forgetting my present company, I suggested a peaceful approach if we encountered him. That earned me one hell of a knockout punch. When I came to, I searched the whole station, but the only signs of Mei Yin and Nerva were a few ounces of dried blood. No bodies, and no Victor. There, floating outside the window and surrounded by machinery, was the very island that I had been living on. Found along the island's many inland waterways, Lutra Pelosa have become among the most mysterious of all flying creatures. Much of what is known about the Phoenix exists in legends which have been told through generations. These myths have often changed through the passing of time. But one constant is the belief that fire represents cleansing and renewal. The Phoenix embodies this process through its everlasting cycle of death and renewal. Extreme heat waves in the desert seem to initiate the rise of the Phoenix, while the end of this so-called superheat precipitated the creature's reversion into ashes. While the Phoenix seems ambivalent to most wildlife, if provoked, its ferocity is evident in its ability to set targets aflame with a single bite. Attempting to pacify a Phoenix is, quite literally, playing with fire. Hammond Rockwell, know that I choose to remember you, not as the monster you were in your final moments, nor as the secretive, obsessive man you became